host. Today we have yet another really cool, exotic episode of Earth is a Witness. Today's topic is Silk Road Journey. It's a really cool topic because today we have with us a guest photographer, Richard Ironson, who is a Canon Master and also the author of Lonely Planet's Guide to Travel Photography. So if there's a travel photographer who knows how to do it, that's Richard. Richard, welcome to Earth is a Witness.
Thank you, Parimal. Nice to be back.
Nice to be back. That's right. Last time we spoke about India and Nepal. Today, as part of Central Asia Silk Road Journey, you're going to talk about Iran, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. All very, very cool countries, exotic. Most people probably haven't been there. I have not been there. So I just want to ask you, Richard, as you start sharing your images, why these three countries? Why Central Asia?
I've been traveling Parimal for over 35 years now. And on one hand, it was a matter of the time had come to go there. You know, you can only go to so many places per year, so time is finite. I've always had Central Asia on my mind, however. I read some great books about the Silk Route when I was starting to travel. And I've been to a lot of other places on the Silk Road. You know, I mean, it's not one road, it's multiple branches and roads that was built to take trade from east to west and west to east. Mm-hmm. And so I've been to a lot of the places in northern India, in the Himalaya, in China, of course, where it starts. But the Central Asian part of it, I just hadn't got to. I went to Iran for the first time three or 4 years ago, and it was absolutely fascinating. So I went back a year later, and that's when I thought, really, I now need to start expanding the places I've seen and visited and photographed in that region. So yeah, the opportunity came up to take a group to Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, and I also managed to make it to Azerbaijan on that trip. So there's still a few stands to go, but as you've already said, the Silk Road itself sounds very exotic. Central Asia sounds exotic, and then within Uzbekistan, there's Samarkand and Bukhara and Khiva. These have to be some of the most exotic sounding place names, I think, in the world. So that in itself holds an attraction. So finally, that Central Asia part of the Silk Road is very pivotal, of course, and it's therefore got a lot of history, a lot of culture. And so, yes, I was very appreciative to get the chance to go.
Great, and likewise, we are excited that you're going to share images and stories from those places, because it's not very often that we get to talk about these lesser known but equally beautiful places. So thanks for that, Richard. So as you set up and share your slideshow, how do you, a common question we often get as photographers is, how do you break into a place when it's new to you, it's the first time? How do you break in?
Depends where it is, but particularly in big cities, I will head to the markets or the bazaars. I think they're a great, very focused and very intense reflection of the place. And I just know from experience that I'm going to find people and places and things of interest in those areas that I'm going to really enjoy photographing. And quite often they're they can be iconic. So we'll start here in Iran. The main bazaar in Tehran is massive. It's almost a city within a city. It can be quite daunting, some of these places. These aren't small, countryside markets. These are massive, massive, with streets and lanes. And I think, but no matter what the size of the market or the bazaar, that's where I will head first if I don't have any other specific purpose that I'm there for.
It's cool.
So the main bazaar in Tehran, as I just said, is huge. And really, when somewhere is this big, I will visit multiple times over the trip. I'll go early, always go early, but then I will go at a different time of day, and I will go back again early usually. partly because of the size, but one of the things that can happen quite quickly is you gain familiarity. And the more familiar you are, the quicker the whole process. So I can get from the entrance, say, to the carpet makers much quicker on my second visit than I did on the first, partly because you get distracted on the way. But by the
You can
second or
probably
the
find
third,
your way properly. Yeah.
by the second or the third visit, I'm usually starting to go to specific places within the bazaar that I've noted are particularly photogenic or of particular interest to me, or places that look great but I didn't get the shot I wanted. So each visit becomes more targeted, and that's much easier, obviously, as you get more familiar. And, you know, confidence builds. And in some of these places, people start to recognize you, and that can be quite a good thing.
That's cool. Love the colors on this image.
The Tehran Bazaar is really interesting because it is so huge. It's, you know, been there for thousands of years, but it holds obviously the shops and the markets that we're used to, the shops, I should say, and the stalls that you're used to in any bazaar. But within the Tehran Bazaar, there are all these businesses. So the carpet section doesn't just sell carpets. It's got all the people. It's got some people making them. It's got this guy who sells the wool to the carpet makers. It's obviously got the sellers. There are banks. There are obviously, well, not obviously, but there are lots of cafes and tea houses. There are mosques. There's a fire station in there. I mean, this place literally is a city within a city. And so it does take some navigating. This mosque, for example, is a very small mosque, but it is in the bazaar. And there are several of these here. And yes, as you can see, I was able to enter and I was able to shoot.
Beautiful. It's a very, I love the intricacy of the mosque. So beautiful.
One of the other things about this area, and Iran probably is the standout country, is the absolute friendliness and welcoming nature of the people. And I think this is one of the things that surprises people a lot when you talk about Iran. I know when I first put Iran up as a potential trip for people to come on, people were enthusiastic, but then over the months before, just about everybody had questions around safety and security and what it would feel like to be there. And nearly all of those questions came from their family and friends, putting sort of a doubt in their mind that it wasn't safe or that you were crazy to go there. And that was really interesting. Nobody did pull out because everybody really wanted to go, but it was just interesting that perception, particularly of Iran, is reasonably negative. And I've said ever since my first visit, there's just this massive disconnect between the politics, the international politics, which is what we see on the Western media, and what it's actually like in the country. And this shot and the next one sort of typify what it's like. If you sit down in a cafe anywhere, you will be engaged in a friendly conversation within minutes by the people around you. They're absolutely fascinated that you're there. A lot of the people speak really good English, I suppose, particularly in the cafes and things where you're going. And they're fascinated as much about you as you are about them. And they're just very open to learn. And they've got a lot of questions about what it's like to live in Australia or America or wherever you live. And so you end up making a lot of connections, and it's great fun. This is another thing that is I found very interesting in Iran. They are as obsessed with taking selfies as any other country, particularly the young people. And me and the people traveling with me were constantly being photographed. This is just a classic example of these young women. I saw them, they were photographing each other in this smaller bazaar, and they grabbed the women from my group and they wanted selfies. Everybody exchanged Instagram handles. They still follow me, these three girls.
Oh, wow, very nice. That's cool.
That is one of the most surprising things, I think, for people who haven't been there or haven't really thought too much about what it might be like there.
What are some of the questions they ask you about living in the West or Australia? What are their misconceptions that clears up when they talk to someone like you?
What are their misconceptions? I think, well, probably one of them is that we don't like them.
Mm,
That's probably the big one, and you know that's easily dealt with because you're there and you say,
yeah,
well, that's look, they understand totally what we're being fed through the media. And look, probably a lot of the people, particularly the younger people, probably don't like some of the things that are going on with their politics, just like we don't in our own countries.
mm,
So there was never really any issues. It was always interesting and always welcoming.
that's cool. Did you try, Richard? The on the previous image, the two guys. I love the energy in that where they were trying the hookah or the shisha.
Ah,
Did
yep.
you try some of that?
I did, but not. I'm not a big fan of
You're
it.
not a big smoker.
I
Okay.
tried it. I probably don't have the patience. Plenty of
So
people in
I love
my
the
group,
energy.
plenty of people in my group enjoyed them. So yeah, you are. It's totally accessible. What about you, Parimal? Do you like the
I have,
shisha?
I have. In fact, Iran is a place that I would love to go to. In fact, I'm seeing some of the Facebook and YouTube comments. It's a place that a lot of people would like to go to. I have been to Dubai and Turkey, and I have tried some of the shisha with different flavors. Again, not a big smoker. I don't think I can do what this guy is doing, but it's a cool image, and I love the energy.
Yeah,
Oh,
you can.
beautiful.
My group, particularly one or two of the people in the group, particularly enjoyed, blowing through their nose. And did someone blow through their ears? They might have done, and making these crazy patterns. So
Wow.
you do get some great photos. They're not necessarily all publishable, but they're a lot of fun.
This is a beautiful image.
Yes,
Beautiful
this
image.
is probably one of the most famous places in Iran because it's very popular with photographers. It's the Pink Mosque in Esfahan. That's it's the Pink Mosque in Shiraz. Sorry, I do tend to mix these cities up, Parimal.
Yeah.
It's known as the Pink Mosque in Shiraz, and it's famous because of these stained glass windows. So it's quite unique. Um, and if you go early enough, the low angle of the sun puts the colours and the patterns of the glass onto the Persian rugs and onto the pillars and the walls of the mosque. So it's incredibly photogenic. It has become very popular very quickly. And when
Mm.
I first went, there was no one else there at opening time. And opening time is whenever the caretaker turns up. So you get there early and you wait. And the second time I went, say 2 years later, there was a queue of people waiting to go.
I
That's
love this.
tourism, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love this image. In fact, just for everyone, I actually purchased a print from you of this image. I just love it so much. It's a beautiful image. The glass stains, the Persian carpets that Iran is famous for, all the work on the walls and the ceiling is just exotic. Beautiful.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a beautiful place. Um, I mean, the mosques, obviously, in Central Asia, around Central Asia, are absolutely incredible. And I remember on my first trip, I would go into one and be completely blown away, and you take hundreds of pictures of every single tile and the roof and the domes inside and outside. And then the next day you go to another one, it was like, this one's more amazing than yesterday. And this would
Yeah.
happen day after day. I mean, the architecture is remarkable. But what I've loved, and these two pictures sort of show that, is that you might go to the place because of the mosque and because of the famous architecture, and it is very beautiful. But always there's the people, and the people are there. These places are, thriving places of worship. All they're places that the local people visit anyway. So you can certainly have plenty of time more quietly, I guess, photographing the architecture and the building and the details. But inevitably, I was drawn to the people who also, the local people who come to these places to worship or just to sit and read, meet their friends. So that's particularly what I love about travel photography, where you blend these two sort of subjects, in this case, people and architecture. So that's what these two pictures illustrate, as opposed to the straight classic dome photo. Big wide angle lens. You can use your tripod in a lot of these places. It's no restrictions. You just obviously have to be sensitive to what's going on. But quite often there aren't too many people around, and you can use a tripod, or you can put your camera on the ground and you get a long exposure that way. But you do spend a lot of time looking up, because these places are absolutely remarkable.
It also highlights, I mean, clearly the beauty is such immense. The culture and tradition is so deep. It also almost provokes the thought that you can't dismiss a country based on popular media or something that might be a problem, but it's a very today's problem in some ways. But there's so much fabled history that goes back centuries when you look at this mosque and the work behind it.
Oh, totally agree. Yeah. If the place isn't, at war, if you like, civil war, an actual international type of war, and it's just politics you're dealing with, nearly all of the time, the places are as friendly as anywhere else. This is one of the few places where I was actually asked not to take a picture, but I'd already taken it. So if I just walked in, and because I was so used to, in Iran, being welcomed and taking pictures, and I walked in and stood there for a while and waved at the guys, and they smiled back, and I took one frame. I put the camera down, and I think the owner or the manager came up and said, "Please don't take any photos." It was very polite, which was such a shame, because I got this nice wide shot, but then I was really looking forward to sort of delving a bit deeper and photographing some of the guys, and the room itself is fascinating. But again, this is on the edge of a bazaar, and these tea rooms are absolute magnets, mainly clearly for the men in this case, but there was another room at the back where men, women and families could gather, and that's actually where we were able to go and sit down as well.
This is quite something, huh? This scene, it's almost like a beer bar, or drinks. Their way of getting together as a group.
Yes, it is.
It's also striking. They're all men, together, and then women probably are in a different room, as you said.
Yeah, well, that's pretty typical. That is very typical. Except there is a lot of family gatherings, particularly in the evenings and outdoors. So the cafes did seem to be segregated, except for the more modern cafes where young people gathered, students, and they were very mixed.
Yeah.
This is I bet you can't guess what this is unless you've looked at.
No, I have no idea.
Pictures.
No, I have not.
This is a pigeon house.
Oh, wow.
And I guess it's a restored pigeon house, but all those little holes are where pigeons used to perch, and they would collect the guano for fertilizing the fields. And there are quite a lot of these. They can be 5 or 6 stories tall, and they're circular, and they're, absolutely fascinating. And another one of the really pleasant surprises that I came across in Iran, they really don't look much from the outside. They're mud brick, a little bit nondescript except for their shape, but inside they're absolutely fascinating. And on this particular day, a school group of girls turned up. There must have been about 80 young women, all fully dressed in their black gowns, burqas almost, and they were giggling and laughing. And this thing had about 4 different levels, maybe 5. So obviously narrow staircases going up between each level, and they just completely filled the place. It was packed, and they were laughing and giggling and running around and carrying on. And they just loved having my group there, because everyone was photographing everybody. But after a while, I sort of stood back, and I composed this photo and thought, yeah, this is normally how I work. I thought, wouldn't it be great if one of the girls went there, and eventually one did. Quite usually they went to these balconies in twos and threes. So when this girl turned up on her own and then, gave me the perfect pose, I was pretty pleased. These things happen in an instant, as you know, so that makes it even more pleasing. But, I was set up waiting for this. I didn't just sort of point the camera up and get the composition, everything right in the first go. I prepared for it. And thankfully, this young woman came along and provided that, what I call a dynamic element, that thing that makes the picture stand out.
It brings it alive. Also, you were kind of anticipating, you were ready, and then you had patience. You waited for the right thing to happen.
Yeah.
I also love the composition of the, woman's looking up, and then on the right hand side, these, I don't know what the pigeonholes are, they're like facing down. It's a very interesting composition.
Yeah. They're really interesting places.
Yeah. Beautiful.
But, again, it was the people that bought it that made it alive. Interestingly, very interesting from a historical point of view, very interesting from a architecture point of view, and lots of pictures to take. But it was when the girls turned up that it really became a fantastic place to be.
Are you a people guy, Richard? Do you enjoy people?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But I've always said, as a landscape photographer, I'm equally comfortable alone in a wilderness area as I am in a crowded city, and that's been the pleasure really of my time doing this. That opportunity to swing or to fluctuate between all these different subjects and environments.
It's beautiful.
The obviously Persian carpets are very, very famous worldwide. Might have even bought a couple myself when I was in Iran. This town, it's a small town called Kashan, is famous for its carpets. And so I was determined to photograph the carpet makers, which, in so many places I've been to is really easy, because quite often they're set up to sell carpets and they welcome tourists in the purpose of selling to you, but the workshops are usually close by. In this case, though, it turned out that nearly all the carpets are made in private houses. And in the houses, people might have one or two, at the most 3 looms that the family work on. So they don't have these sort of workspaces that are accessible to somebody just wandering by. Thankfully, I had a really good guide, and I told him what the aim was, and he went out and found a place. This place had about 16 looms, I think. So it was more of a workshop. It was very compact in there, very compact between the looms. And I did all my standard shots, which is just a variety of shots from behind and featuring the women's face and the other side, the patterns it's creating. But thankfully, I was able to get behind this loom, and for me, this was a different shot to all the other carpet making shots that I've taken over the years.
It's a beautiful abstraction, as the light comes through the weave. It's beautiful. And then you can see the fingers. It's just a lovely composition.
Yeah, that's what makes it.
Oh, wow.
I put the desert shot in just to illustrate for people who don't know Iran just how diverse it is. Like so many countries, we often get a bit of a one-dimensional view about what's there. But Iran is huge. The main roads are really good to get around. But there is a couple of massive deserts, and they're classic, sand dune, Saharan style deserts. It take a little bit of getting to, they're not really on the normal tourist trail, but I put this in to show the diversity of the landscape in the country. It's not just all architecture and bazaars. And it is a really beautiful place. And I have to admit, after the days and days of being in the big cities and surrounded by people, it was nice to spend a little bit of time, composing classic desert landscapes.
Yeah, it's just amazing leading lines. It's beautiful composition. And the complementary orange and blue never fails.
Never. Yeah, you just got to be there late or early, don't you?
Yeah, just right light, but again, beautiful.
Yeah. I didn't do as much street photography in Iran as I would have liked to, but mainly because that's the nature of leading a photography trip. You know, the schedules are pretty packed, and you're making sure you get to all the main destinations. But whenever I got the chance, I would get out, and I'd encourage other people to get out and just go for a wander. So this is outside a mosque in a small town. We did stay the night, but we were really passing through. It doesn't have any big sights, so it's a good chance to get out and just wander. This is something I'm much more familiar with seeing in India and Nepal. You know, sort of shrines everywhere that people just walk up to and make an offering or say a prayer, as opposed to the more formal big mosques that we've been in. And this was on the outside of a mosque, but it was the only one I saw where people would just light a candle or do some of their own form of worship outside. So that was really interesting. So therefore, I went back here a couple of times just to see what was happening.
A common question we often have is, especially with women or in a foreign country, not to mention women in hijabs or burqas, how do you kind of break in and take that image? Do you have to ask for permission, or you just take an image and see how it goes, or how do you familiarize yourself with the surrounding?
It's both. It's always both, no matter where. And it applies for me. This is just my way of working. Anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter what country it is. It's both. If it's a close-up portrait where I'm obviously photographing something, or if I'm, say, in a bazaar where I've taken up a position at a particular stall, I will get the permission of the stall owner to be there. And then it's a matter of, is this a candid, or is this something that I'm going to need to ask permission for? So I think ultimately you just have to get a sense of the situation and the people yourself, and it's personal. A lot of people don't like photographing people because they feel conscious, or they feel they're invading their privacy, or they think it draws attention to them, all of that stuff. Well, obviously that's not appropriate thinking for a travel photographer. So in this case, I actually was standing back. I wasn't at the shrine. I was back with maybe 100mm lens, and I just waited for the action to form. So I certainly wasn't imposing, but I certainly didn't ask permission for this, because it wasn't necessary, and it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
So it really is a case by case. And yeah, I think it is one of the skills that you need to develop as a travel photographer, this sense of place and sense of people and what's appropriate and what's not. And mostly I get it right, not always. You'll soon be told. The thing is, what I've never done is hide the camera. So just simply standing here, say 20 meters away from the shrine, I've got my two cameras out. It's pretty obvious what I'm doing. And in most places, if it's inappropriate, someone will tell you.
Yeah.
You know, not in an aggressive way. They'll just say you shouldn't be taking pictures, or don't take pictures, or please don't, or whatever. And I've found that stood me in quite good stead over the years as well.
Yeah, it's cool. Thank you.
All right. Again, another one of these, surprises, adding to the variety. This is in northern Iran. The second trip I did, the first trip was in central Iran, which is where all the really big ticket items are, all the famous places. That's Tehran, Shiraz, Esfahan, Persepolis. That's where most people would go on their first trip. You know, that's got the biggest mosques and the most spectacular architecture. Having done that, the second trip I did was from Tehran along northern Iran, and then traveled overland into Armenia and then onto Georgia. So really, another really fascinating trip, looking at these different cultures. And this second trip in the north of Iran was much more remote. You know, we went to much smaller towns. We saw more village life. And this was one of the highlights of that trip, a place called caravan, and it's basically cave dwellings.
Mm.
It's anyone who's been to Goreme in Cappadocia in Turkey will
Yeah,
recognize it.
Cappadocia,
It's got
Turkey. Right.
exactly the same feel, exactly the same thing, really.
Mm.
It's much smaller, but yeah, the people have lived in these caves for centuries, and then down below, a more modern town has been built. But thankfully, just because of the nature of the way they build their houses and the shape and the colours and the stone, it kind of blends in. But
It's a
yeah,
beautiful.
this did look way more exotic, I have to admit, you know, by waiting for dusk and for
Yeah.
the artificial lights to come on. But and it's not a big area, but it is very interesting. And again, one of those places that just hasn't had that many foreign tourists. I think plenty of Iranians go there,
Mm.
but they haven't had that many foreign tourists.
It's beautiful.
Okay, this that's one of the first shots I took in Uzbekistan.
Okay.
So Uzbekistan was a discrete trip, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, and you know it was a journey along the heart of the Silk Road. There's a lot of interest in this trip because they are, as we discussed at the beginning, they're places that not a lot of people have been to. They do sound exotic, they look exotic in the pictures, and it was, I have to say, it was an easy trip. You know, the roads are good, the accommodation's pretty good, the food was good. If anything, my overall impression for what I saw, which was really the main towns that are famous for being on the Silk Road, I guess namely Tashkent, Bukhara, Samarkand, Khiva, they were very clean. And
Mm.
apart from the central, I guess the old part of the cities, they had a sort of a modern veneer all around them. They were very clean. They didn't have that grungy feel that, you know, I'm just so used to on the subcontinent or
Mm.
in South America. So I thought that was interesting, and it probably it felt a lot more first world than
Mm.
I had expected, I guess.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure if it was the time of year, but apart from, say, the market like this, there just weren't a lot of people around.
Mm.
Now, it could have been because it was quite warm during the day, although it wasn't the peak of summer. So as I go through some of the pictures, a lot of the focus really did become about the architecture and the place. And there were people that obviously I photographed, and there were people there, but certainly not with that same focus that I've just shown you in Iran.
Mm.
So this is in the main bazaar in Tashkent,
And there's
and
something very heartwarming about just bread, you know, Arabic bread, whatever bread it is, especially if it's fresh off the oven. Like, who doesn't like
yeah,
good warm bread?
yeah. Oh, and it's fantastic to eat. So yeah, that was purchased after it was photographed. The the architecture here is, you know, dare I say, equivalent to Iran. You know,
My God,
similar, incredible Islamic style,
beautiful.
staggeringly beautiful buildings. This is a facade in the main square in Samarkand. Behind this facade, you can go in through the doors, and there's courtyards with other significant buildings, absolute beautiful gardens. So yes, this was in this town, this was a real focus, particularly
I
in the
gotta say,
evenings when the lights came on.
the stunning work, the tile work on the mosque, and of course the silhouette of the person on the bike just makes it so lively.
Yeah, yes.
It's beautiful. God, I
So
feel like traveling
this
right
is in
now.
one of the. Sorry, Paramount.
I feel like traveling right now. I'm sure all of you feel like traveling, like get the COVID shot whenever our turn is in. Wow, look at this. My gosh, this is
Yeah.
beautiful.
So this is in one of the courtyards, which are just as ornate as the main buildings and the facades. as you can see, they're setting up to sell some stuff. So these places, they are quite used to tourists. But particularly these main towns, obviously they are very famous, and plenty of people are coming there from around the region as well.
It's lovely. And I have this print too. Clearly, I mean, I'm a fan of your work, man. I have this print too. Yes, I love this.
Again, just like in Iran, there was no I don't recall any issues really shooting inside the mosques. And again, you could use tripods quite often if you wanted to. Otherwise, you're at 1600 ISO and 30 to the second for the people interested in technical things listening. Very, very beautiful. And you can probably just see from that, there are so many photographic possibilities in these buildings. It's absolute pleasure to be in there and photographing.
Wow.
The markets are the same. Yes, so I'm just trying to think. Yeah, the markets were interesting. They were very central, and they were quite large. Pretty interesting. Very similar to a lot of the markets we used to. And again, the people were very happy to be photographed, and it was just a matter of finding, the right person in the right place as usual.
Yes. Yeah.
The theme of friendliness and being welcome absolutely continues through these two countries in Central Asia. This is actually at a shop in a bazaar selling instruments, but the woman was another customer just walking through the bazaar with her friends, who proceeded to grab the drum and beat it while her friends danced. And then just put the instruments back and walked off. So it was like sort of like impromptu busking, but they were just customers. I'm not quite sure what the owner of the musical instrument shop thought, but it certainly provided a nice interaction for photography in between the people. They didn't speak any English, so I think some of the group danced with them. So of course that made everybody smile. They're pretty good interactions when they occur.
Were you able to try out any kind of local music, to check out the local dance music instrument scene?
No, not really. Not that I recall. The evenings were pretty tame, Parimal. Dinner and, a few drinks, and then it was really, didn't seem to be much, not that we necessarily investigated. I am known for being able to hunt that stuff out, but here we didn't come across in the urban areas much of that, but I'm sure it exists. It's just we didn't come across it. For me, these next two shots do sum up what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about there just wasn't a lot of people about, so these squares where the main mosques and the madrasas are in Uzbekistan were mostly empty, particularly at sunrise and sunset, with just the odd person passing through. Whereas in Iran and in so many other places, they are absolutely a focal point for daily life, and people meet there in the evenings, and they can be a real center of activity. But on my trip, the time I was there in these towns in Uzbekistan, they really were quiet. They were quiet places. And so it became a matter of composing for the architecture and then waiting really for somebody to walk through that could enhance the scene. This next one sums up.
I love this. This is a beautiful exhibition. I mean, they're all beautiful. This is stunning as well. The whole dome, and oh, wow.
I love shooting the buildings on their own, and I would definitely have done that. I would have done multiple compositions of just the building and the details, but these are the shots that I will wait for. These are the shots that I'll set up for and hope that, dare I say, appropriate people doing exactly the right thing and wearing exactly the right clothes walk through my scene.
No, it also gives it a immense sense of scale.
Yeah.
Without the people, you don't quite know how big this is.
Yeah. Well, I think you can see it's big. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Where exactly,
Inside
what place in Uzbekistan are these two shots?
Bukhara.
Bukhara.
Bukhara. Yeah. No, Bukhara. And this is inside a tomb in Khiva. So
Hmm.
the third of the sort of really famous cities, if you like. Again, this was a bit of fun, and I have fun with my fellow group members who get into this stuff where, you know, I encourage people to find a composition where everything works and then wait for this dynamic element.
Yeah.
And in this case, there were people going into this other room on the opposite side. I'm actually in the equivalent doorway that you can see where the woman is on this side. So I was in the way. So I constantly had to keep moving to let people in and out, and then jump back in and recompose the shot, hoping. And I knew this woman in the red dress was in there. She probably spent more time in that room than any other person in the history of tourism to this tomb. And that's because I was waiting for her to come out. The room is not that big. I don't know what she was doing in there for so long. I don't think she was just hiding from me. But yes, this shot did require way more patience than I thought it would have, because most people were just going in and out. But she went in and just didn't come out for about 25 minutes.
No, it's I completely get it. When you find a composition and you just wait for the right element, and sometimes you just wait. Patience pays off. Beautiful.
So now we traveled overland from Uzbekistan into Turkmenistan. And I've only got a couple of shots here. It was a great place to go. It's definitely one of the weirdest countries I've ever been to. Again, you know, it's sort of run by a dictator who thinks he's a god. So his pictures everywhere. He's built statues to himself, and his predecessor did the same thing. The capital, Ashgabat, is all white marble, all white Italian marble. So that alone makes it quite a sight. We came overland, as I said, from Uzbekistan. We came to this crater, which I'll talk about in a moment, but we were on desert roads, dirty, dusty roads. We got to the outskirts of the capital city, and our cars all drove off. They went around a few back blocks and ended up in what I thought was a massive car park, only to find out that it was a car wash, and they'd all gone in to wash their cars, because if you don't have a clean car in the capital, you can get fined. So all the cars were absolutely sparkling clean as we drove into our sparkling clean white Italian marble hotel.
Wow.
And they've got these 6-lane roads with no traffic. During the middle of the day when it was quite hot, there was just nobody anywhere. It had almost had a ghost town feel to it. So absolutely fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I would definitely go back. Two of the reasons to go back, though, are these two landscapes. This is called the Darvaza gas crater. It's in the middle of a desert. The story varies. If you Google it, you'll find that the most common story is that the Russians were digging or drilling for gas, and something happened, an explosion of some sort that blew up and created this crater. Now, I think this was 40 or 50 years ago. They thought that the gas that they discovered but wasn't controlled would just burn out. Well, it's still burning decades later. So it's one of the most unusual sort of man-made landscapes anywhere, I think. And this thing just burns, and they don't know when it's going to stop. And of course, it's become a tourist attraction. It's just this crater in the ground, in the middle of the desert, that burns all the time.
Wow. It's very surreal and interesting.
It's surreal. Yeah. Yeah. But the real reason I would go back to Turkmenistan like that is because of this place. This is called Yankala Canyon. They call it the Grand Canyon. It's their Grand Canyon. It's got to be one of the most incredible natural landforms or landforms in the world. It really is a Grand Canyon, very different to the state, Arizona's Grand Canyon. But you can, as you can see, you can get up high. But again, it's in the middle of a desert. It's a long way from anywhere. We went out there, we camped by the crater that night. We were the only ones there. It has an incredibly remote, surreal feel to it. I've just got 3 or 4 shots to give you a sense of the area and the landform. And, we camped, 50, 100 meters walk from these various viewpoints that lets you look over this. And this is the shot that came out of it that I absolutely love. It's a really special place. And it's just one of those places that people see the pictures and everyone says, where is that? I've got to go. It's not that hard to get to once you're in Turkmenistan. It just takes a bit of time. So yeah, pretty special.
And this is not from a plane or a drone. This is, you were at a vantage point?
Yeah, no, it's typical canyon. It's eroded. It's got these eroded canyons, but I believe you can get down, although I couldn't see a way down. I think obviously people who like scrambling down very steep cliffs or whatever could, but you could get down, but it would be a long drive. And anyway, there were several viewpoints. It's quite an extensive area, several viewpoints that overlook, if you like, different canyons that are below you. And so yes, it's a true canyon in that sense, in that you're up high on the plateau looking down into the eroded landforms below. So really special, Parimal. I would absolutely go back there again.
Beautiful. My God, this is stunning. Everything is stunning. I love your work. I mean, I have your prints, so, and I paid for your prints. So nobody thinks I'm asking for free, but I love your work, man. I'm such a big fan. Don't tell Art. Actually, I don't own his work yet.
His work's too expensive, I'm sure.
Anyway, I have a question, a couple of questions, actually, many questions, but I'll hit upon a few. A question from Debbie. Richard, will you be running this tour again? People are obviously thinking about, traveling post-COVID world. How often do you run these tours, and where can people find out about information about you and the tours and workshops you run?
Yes, thank you, Debbie. A tour to this part of the world is not scheduled at the moment. There is a reasonable chance I will do something in the area again. Very rarely do I do exactly the same trips. And that's just because, I'm interested in exploring new places. But sometimes on a trip, we might go back to, say, one place that I've been to before because it's special like this. So look, it's always a possibility. Nothing is scheduled. My website is probably the best place to see the trips that are coming up. Usually they're planned a year out. The whole COVID thing has obviously thrown all of us into disarray. But that's probably the best place, and you can subscribe, and then you end up on the mailing list, and you will very infrequently get notified of new trips.
But just to be clear, if Debbie wants to pay you $1 million, your answer would be yes right now, immediately.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to be clear,
open to doing private trips.
Okay. Everyone should check out Richard Ionson's website, Richard Ionson, Google it, .com. By the way, if this is the last image, you can stop sharing. I do have a couple more questions that I can ask as well.
Okay. Yep.
Again, thanks a lot, Richard. From Chester, are you an American? I know you're not, but I'm just going to ask because a lot of people want to know as well. Because there's a question about, can Americans go to Iran and some of these places?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. I think it's a little harder in terms of getting visas. But no, plenty of Americans, I met Americans in Iran, plenty of Americans go to Iran, and certainly Central Asia, there's no issues at all. I think Iran, you've got more trouble because of the politics, and now forget COVID, now may not be the best time, but these things, this politics does ebb and flow, and there will be a time probably fairly soon where it settles down a bit. So you don't have the same kind of problem. But Americans don't have any particular problems in Iran
Yeah.
because they're American. People are just fascinated.
And
That's
Chester,
my experience.
yeah,
That's my
and
experience, Paramount. Yeah.
that's your experience. And
Yeah.
Chester, Richard is
That's all I can
Australian.
talk about.
Richard is Australian. Everyone, Richard is Australian. What that means is your cricket team is not as good as Indian cricket team is what it really means.
Well, I'll correct you just because we're, recording this, Parimal. I was actually born in England. I was born in
Okay.
Leicester in the Midlands, and I came to Australia when I was 10.
Oh, I didn't know that. I learned something.
So I have two passports, and
Wow, I didn't know
yes,
that.
I am Australian when it comes to cricket, and
Okay.
English when it comes to football.
There you go. Love that. Um, Last question as we wrap this up. Actually, it's a question for even our audience as well. Is as things open up, and hopefully things will open up for all of us. What's, a question to the audience? What's on your bucket list? What's the one country you would go next? Would it be Iran? Would it be Uzbekistan? Would it be Turkmenistan? Or any other country? I'd love to know in your comments just to see what people's interests are. And then as we wrap this up, question to you, Richard. Actually, two questions. Same question to you as well. What's the first country you will go to outside Australia? And then I'll ask my last question after that.
Well, it looks like all this year's international trips have been cancelled. I do have a trip scheduled for Ethiopia in January, but I can't see that happening. So it looks like it's going to be Antarctica and South Georgia, March 2022.
Okay.
Which was
great to know.
a trip that was postponed from this year to next.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that goes, because it'll bookend COVID nicely for me, because the very last trip I did before international travel ceased was in fact to Antarctica and South Georgia. So if that comes off, it will bookend my lockdown or my being grounded experience nicely.
Yeah. And my last question, Richard, is what's your one takeaway from traveling to Central Asia part of the Silk Route journey? Something we can all take away from.
I think it's probably something I already touched on, that and again, this probably refers more to Iran, but if people aren't familiar with the countries, they do often get lumped together. The disconnect between international politics and what it's actually like as a visitor is huge. They are the most welcoming, friendly countries. Before I went to Iran, doing all the research, I read a lot of stuff, read the guidebooks, read people's blogs, whatever you can read. Without fail, the authors would say the highlight of your trip to Iran will be the people. And I've been twice now, and I can absolutely verify that. I say that myself now when I'm talking to people. It is without doubt, Iran particularly, the friendliest place. And I'll just tell you one final story if you like.
Yeah.
We would go out in the evening to take photos, and if you went to places where the Iranian families were gathering, they would gather in the early evening, sort of to watch sunset, but they'd gather as families. They would take their picnics, or they'd just take their tea or whatever, and you would be called over and you would be offered food.
Oh, wow.
Or tea. And so this is really nice, but for me, this is a really crucial time of the day to shoot. So I'm on the move, I'm looking, and every time I'm offered a cup of tea, I have to somehow find a polite way to move on. Sometimes I would stop. This is one of the things I just have to deal with. My group, though, found this absolutely fascinating. So they were stopping and eating, and it became a competition when they got back and compared stories as to who was offered the most interesting things. One particular night, the winning couple were offered half a massive watermelon and a knife and told to go away and eat it.
Wow.
So the problem with a large watermelon and a knife is it's almost impossible to keep taking pictures. So
yeah,
I would have had to politely decline, but thankfully my friends didn't, and they enjoyed that. But that for me sums up what it's like when you're actually there. And that's the thing I would absolutely encourage people to think about when they're planning trips to these parts. They will be blown away by the hospitality.
Love it. I have a few Iranian friends, who are probably watching as well, and I it's a plus one. Just wonderful people. We in fact have Iranians living in India
Yeah.
that migrated to India, decades back, and wonderful food, wonderful culture, and again, not to say same about I'm sure about the Uzbeks as well. So thanks a lot, Richard. Everyone watching this, hopefully this is created some ideas in our minds for where we will travel when we all can, and a few more really cool places to consider. Everyone, please do check out Richard Ionson's website. Beautiful images for sure, like beautiful images. We just saw a small sample of that, and also a professional photographer who does this for a living. So no other, workshop to look for but Richard's. As you consider this, you check out his website.
Thank you, Parimal. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Richard. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.